had to go back and reread something like that.
All my since I took him to school for the book, so I made sure we highlight.
That was a test.
Well, I know when the teacher says, "Oh, Ray got this paragraph here in this book." How you gonna do that? We can't copy any of the words in the paragraph. So if it had this in it, we can put this in our.
That's why you need synonyms. Know your synonyms.
You're like, well, how am I supposed to reword it from that?
It's kind of like playing the game, oh, what is it? Anyway, when you should say words, they have a whole list of words that you cannot say.
It's like, what's the opposite word for cat?
Yeah, dog. That's what I would think too. That's what I would think too, cat and
Hey,
dog.
good morning. Good morning.
Simile is
How you
easy,
doing?
feline. Yeah.
Bagley,
All of us got baggage.
yes, we all have baggage somewhere. If it ain't on us, it's with us. He's walking around. Sat on my pile of books.
What is it,
Yeah,
9:30?
oh, the big top of the day.
I guess so. Stack a few more, right?
I was this, I had stuck in my pocket, I hope I started, yeah, I started, oh, I got 9:30 on this. Oh.
Just time I was rushing to get back in. Over Sarah. Well, I told him it was
It's that
start
time.
charging late fees. I know. I made it today.
Today, away our recess.
I made it today, I know.
Party.
Sit in the corner with the dunce hat on.
Yeah.
I think they should bring that back.
Actually, I did things similar to that to some kids who insisted on misbehaving. They never misbehaved, they were just How are you?
Doing good, how about you?
Good.
Good morning, Lou.
Have dinner?
Morning, Lou. Sam must not be awake yet. You must not be awake yet. Good morning. Now she's awake.
Let's see. He's like, okay, what are we doing on Sunday morning?
All right, we're going to look at Gospel of John. And want to look a bit closer at the miracles that John records. John's Gospel has no parables. That surprises people sometimes. Oh, I'm sure I read a parable in there. No, John does not record any of the parables, and he only records 7 miracles. And each one of the 7 has a specific purpose. He's showing something. 5 of those 7 miracles are not recorded anywhere else. So they're unique miracles that you will only see in John's Gospel. And he warns us, of course, at the end of the Gospel that, hey, this is not everything. Why did John write what he did? Of what Jesus said and did.
He was establishing the deity of Christ.
Okay. One of his big words, these are written, he says, that you might believe. And there's a word that our world has completely, in a religious sense, our world has taken the word belief and completely corrupted it. Belief is not the same as wishful thinking. I believe that Mark is going to give me $10 million before we leave this morning. You recognize the difference between belief and wishful thinking. Mark's stingy. He's going to keep his $10 million. He's got it there in his wallet, and he's not going to let go of it. He's going to check his wallet to make sure it's still there. But that's not belief. And in language, there are different ways to use words that really make a difference. When we use the word believe in the sense of wishful thinking, that's a passive sense. Believe, as used in the New Testament, is always as a verb, an active tense. It's something you do, not something you think or wish or imagine. And that makes a huge difference. And by the way, that's one of the things that if you learn New Testament Greek, I mentioned that John's Gospel is one of the easiest books to read in the New Testament. But that doesn't mean that everything he says is easy. He uses that easy language kind of deceptively to get across some great big points. And every time he uses believe, he uses it as an active verb. This is something you do. It involves how you live. And that's totally different than what our world has somehow transformed that into and imagined it to be. So John is showing some signs, miracles, things that and again, remember how the Bible defines a miracle. This is something outside of nature. If I get a cut on my arm and it bleeds and it opens up there, an obvious wound, it will heal. You mop up the blood, you tape it back together again, and you go on. If you're a big boy, you rub dirt in it. How many other people got taught that as a kid growing up? It's not that bad, just rub dirt in it and go on. I'm sorry, a lot of kids today are just sissies. They want to cry and carry on, and yes, I can understand the sympathy. I'm a grandparent. I'll pick them up and fuss over them. But as a parent, you just tell them, come on, toughen up a little bit. Get going. Don't moan over every little thing. The way that wound heals is perfectly normal. Now, what happens if you cut your arm about half off and somebody touches it and all of a sudden it's back to perfectly normal? That's not natural. That's not the way things work. And I guarantee you will never find anyone on earth that, in spite of all the nonsense on TV and all, nobody can do that. The laws of nature, the things that God has already set in motion will work to heal that. But when the Bible talks about a miracle, or John's word, a sign, it's something that's completely outside of nature. It's when Jesus takes a guy that's been dead so long and in the grave so long that he stinks, and they don't even want to move the rock for it. Preacher stories. Congregation we were with a number of years ago, a couple of men went over to visit a denominational meeting, and they had announced that there was going to be great healings and great miracles worked in this meeting. So a couple of the men went over and sat in on the meeting. And the first thing the preacher did, after somebody punched him in the side and whispered to him, is he got up and he announced, Satan is present in the building tonight. We won't be able to do any miracles. Somebody remind me, was Satan present in the world when Jesus walked this earth? And so that stopped him from being able to do miracles, right? Not a bit. Not a bit. That's hilarious, you know. Who's greater? Oh, well, Satan's much greater than the power of God. No, you're just talking nonsense. By the way, they did invite him out to the graveyard. He announced that he had actually raised people from the dead before, and that he could do it. Such was his power. Whenever he wanted to, he could raise someone from the... They had two questions for him afterwards. One, how come you're not around at the hospitals helping out? And two, come on out to the graveyard with us tonight. We will pick you someone and you raise them from the dead, and we'll tell you what, after you raise one from the dead, you pick one and we'll raise him from the dead. They were making fun of him, weren't they? You know why? Because he's a fraud. I'll be even blunter, Betty. He's an absolute fraud. He had no power at all. So when Jesus performs a miracle, it is something that is completely outside of nature, what you would expect. And the 7 miracles that Jesus performs are done so that you will believe. That's how he concludes the book, the gospel. And in believing, what's the result of believing? Remember how John words that? These things are written that you might believe, and in believing, you might have life. Real life comes from acting on the truth. And it's hilarious, you know, in life, anything we do. How many of us believe strong enough that while we're in church this morning that the food at your house is going to jump out of the freezer and into the oven and prepare lunch and have it ready? No. But I believe if you get up and get it out and put it together and fix it, that you will have lunch. Real belief takes action. And so John is using these miracles as an illustration for us to act on our faith, our active faith, our active belief, and live. You ever see someone that just wanted to die, that had given up? Pretty sad sight. Sometimes it happens to people that, you know, they're very sick and you understand, said, look, you know, you're struggling. But what happens when it's someone that's perfectly healthy and ought to live and they just, no, I quit? That's sad. That's pathetic. Do we ever tell ourselves, don't be quitters? And we should. Don't be giver-uppers. And John says these things are written, the signs, the evidence of the power of God are put down that you might actively believe and live. Real life. Let's take a look at the 7 signs that he chooses. The first one is in John chapter 2. And what's unique about this is it's a demonstration of quality. Jesus changes water into wine. Doesn't seem a big deal, does it? People do that every day. Well, it takes months of work, but and again, we're not talking a healing that takes 6 months and physiotherapy and everything to get better. We're talking something that is instantaneously done. And you remember, we talked about this last Sunday as well in the sermon, the wedding at Cana of Galilee. How does Jesus perform the miracle?
He had him fill a bunch of
Okay.
bags full of water and have the head waiter taste it.
All he does is tell the servants to go fill those pots with water. Sometime between the time they filled them with water, and they may, by the way, you ever see those pots, they're all tapered at the bottom. They're not the kind of thing you grab and run and dunk under the water and set one down and fill another one. Because then it tips over and everything drains out. Well, why do they make them that way? Well, they had a good reason for that. Mostly it was for shipping, because they shipped them in ships that way, all over the world. But they bring that thing in, and it has to sit in a metal base, something to hold it upright. Now it says that they fill the pots. It doesn't say how they filled them. You realize they may take a bucket and go over and fill it a bucket at a time. But as soon as they're full, it's tasted, and what has happened? It's turned into wine. And of course, the unique thing that the head waiter there notices is it's not cheap stuff. You realize Jesus could have carried around a bottle of vinegar and dumped a little bit of vinegar into each of those, and somebody tasted it and said, "Oh yeah, that's wine. That's good enough. Serve it to people." Oh no, they could have tasted better. You remember a discussion that goes on? Why couldn't anybody have tasted any better? Because everybody had been drinking the other stuff enough that their taste, they couldn't tell the difference. I'll be honest, there's a lot of things that I've had to drink in my life that I thought were so bad the first time I took them, I wasn't going to try them again. I'm easy. I'd rather drink the water myself. But the picture there is something absolutely unique. It's not just tipping a little bit of cheap vinegar in and giving it a little bit of flavor. It's something that is immediately tasted and realized this is the high quality stuff. Now, if you've ever done any wine making or know anybody that has, can you make wine in 5 minutes? Not going to happen. Can't even make real good vinegar in 5 minutes. It takes time. And so Jesus' authority produces what is the absolute best. And he overcomes the time involved. And again, you see the picture of a miracle outside of the laws of nature. I guarantee you're not going to go home and duplicate what Jesus did. It's never going to happen. What else do you notice about in miracles that Jesus did in the other Gospels? Anything else really related to quantity like that? Quality, excuse me. Those two big words, huh? Quality. Did Jesus ever make anything that was infinitely better than anything else?
Jesus always makes
Ah, quality was always in everything that he did.
There's a lesson in that for us. Don't give Jesus your junk.
Isn't it funny that the very last book of the Old Testament, I wonder why God arranged that way. Malachi talks about the offerings that people were giving, and you remember what kind of offerings they were giving to God? The sick and the lame and the cripple and the stuff that was no good.
At the very least, it was less than their best.
It was less than their
That's what
best.
God wants from us. He wants our best in whatever we do.
And what does God give?
Only the best.
Always the best. Can't you just picture, think about the things that are not said. Here's Lazarus coming out of the grave, and he comes limping out and he says, well, this side of my body's alive now, but the other side's still dead and rotting. You say, that's ridiculous. That's right. Because Jesus, God, never does anything halfway. So quality in changing the water to wine. The second miracle occurs in John 4:46. This time there's a royal official, and his son is sick at Capernaum. Now, notice, this is one of those things, flip over the back of your Bible and have a look at the maps. Where is Jesus? Okay. Not just Galilee, but look how verse 46 begins. He's in Cana of Galilee. So he's in this town, and there's a royal official whose son is sick over at that other town, Capernaum. So they're not even in the same town. When the man had heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he goes to him. So where does he go to visit Jesus? To Cana. Cana of Galilee. And where is his sick son? Capernaum. Doesn't say, I brought my son with me. He goes to see Jesus. And he begs Jesus to come with him back to Capernaum and heal his son. So this man understands, there's a distance involved here, and there's no way that, if you can heal somebody's... If you work in an ambulance service or first aid or fire department or anything, and you get a call about a car wreck, do you know how often you sit there at the station and say, okay, well, let me fix the car wreck and let me treat the sick people out there at, down towards Savannah? You don't accomplish anything. You have to get in your truck, you have to go over to the location where the accident is, and you physically take the people in order to do anything for them. You say, well, that's pretty simple. That's right. Keep watching. Jesus is begged to come down and heal the man's son because the son is at the point of death. Verse 48, and Jesus immediately begins to criticize. Have you ever heard somebody argue with you and say, hey, I could really believe that the Bible is true if I could just see some miracle myself. If God would just do this for me, How many people make an agreement with God? God, if you will just get me out of this mess, then I will go and serve you. Do you suppose God ever gets tired of hearing people saying, well, yeah, I'm going to one day? Or I would if you would do something for me. Oh, no. This is Jesus. He never gets tired of anything. Haven't actually read the Gospels, have you? Jesus said, unless you people see signs and wonders, you simply will not believe. You ever give your kids a lecture about being hard-headed? And usually at this point, a parent would usually say something like, now, get back there and do your job. And honestly, wouldn't it be fair for God at this point to simply say, look, I've showed you and you still don't believe. Suck it up, buttercup. Straighten up your life and do the right thing. You got to love this man. I mean, after all, it's his child. If it's your child and you're begging someone to come take care of them. Verse 49, the royal official says to him, hurry up. Come down before my child dies. Honestly, do you suppose Jesus just kind of rolled his eyes and, ugh. These people are dumber than rocks. They demand something from God. And, okay, we've all been there. Worried about somebody and asking God, well, God, why don't you answer my prayer and do this? I wonder if God sometimes rolls his eyes at us and says, boy, I've blessed you and taken care of you all your life, and you ask for just one more thing. Grow up. I've thought a time or two in my life, I sure am glad God doesn't actually speak out loud to us aside from the Bible, because I might not like what he had to say. Well, shouldn't he just do it? How much does he need to do? That's Jesus' question. How much does God need to do for you? He's already given his own son to die for you. And that wasn't enough. What's it take? The royal official says to him, sir, come down before my child dies. And Jesus tells him, go. Go home. Your son lives. Now, I will give this man credit for something that a lot of the people that Jesus dealt with and criticized here don't have. He does not stand there and say, no, Jesus, I'm going to stay here I'm going to keep nagging you until you come with me. When Jesus says, go home, your son is alive, this man turns around and heads home. That is faith. That's belief. Not the wishy-washy stuff of, oh, Lord, I believe and I accept Jesus in my heart, and now I'll go and do everything I was doing before. And somehow God will save me. Those verses are never included in God's word anywhere. Real belief means you get up off your seat and do what you're told. And again, didn't every parent give that lecture at some point? Mom, Dad, I believe you. You told me to do something or I was going to get a whipping. I was going to get in trouble if I didn't do it. I believed you. And all of us as parents immediately says, oh, well, son, daughter, that's wonderful that you believe me. You just don't have to do anything that I told you to do. Nope, that's when the bottom of the britches get. My dad had a great philosophy. He said he firmly believed that the way you made the head smarter was by warming the opposite end. I don't know if it worked or not, but I got an awful lot of stimulation that way. You understand the point, the lesson. This man believes and turns around and goes home. What's he going to do if he gets home and finds his son dead?
You're not going to believe in Jesus.
Not going to continue to believe in Jesus, but something about him and what he has seen and heard, at this point, he says, okay, I believe. Trust. You ever do, there's a little exercise that's done a lot of times in various meetings with people that work together. Trust falls. We're supposed to be some people catch you. I'll be honest, in the fire department, we didn't do trust falls. We picked them up after they'd trusted and fell. But I tell you what, the people you work with, you trust absolutely to back you up and be there and let nothing happen to you. I've hauled a few of my fellow workers out, and a couple of times they've hauled me out. Saved my life. You're there for each other. Absolute trust. It's kind of unique to have someone that you will trust with your life. And this man has just trusted Jesus with his child's life. I don't know, as a parent, I would guess that's probably even harder. As he's going down, his slaves met him, saying his son was alive. And he inquired of them, what time did he begin to get better? What time was he cured? And they told him. You see the travel time there? Yesterday, at the 7th hour. This man is a couple of days away from home, and Jesus won't come with him. But he tells him, your son is well. And he checks up on Jesus. He checks up on God and says, yeah, sure enough, God knows what he's doing. And he himself believed, verse 53, and his whole household. He tells his family, he tells those that his servants that he lives with, and they recognize that Jesus really is who he says he is. Distance, space, means nothing to God. You think about it, sometimes people today say, oh, I can't believe in God unless I get something here, right now. You realize that God can care and does care just as much for you right here, right now. Oh, but he's way off in heaven somewhere. There is no way off. Go back to the Old Testament and read Solomon's prayer of dedication of the temple. I've heard people actually comment, preachers actually comment, Bible class teachers say, you know, in the Old Testament they believed that God lived in the temple. They did not. And Solomon says that in his prayer of dedication. He says, God, the earth is too big to contain you. And you're certainly not going to live in this little building. But it was a symbol. By the way, is this a symbol of God's presence with his people right here with us gathered today? Isn't that what Jesus said? Where two or three of my disciples, there am I in the midst of them. So God is master of quality. He knows about the best, and that's what he's in charge of. By the way, when he created everything on this earth, do you remember the word that he used each day of creation? That he looked back on what he had created each day and said it was what? Good. He creates the best. So when did all this sin and sickness and cancer and diseases and everything come into being? When we chose to sin. Exactly. After. By the way, I saw an ad, Lou and I saw an ad somewhere, may have been over in Pooler the other day, talking about the apple that Adam and Eve ate. You do know that in Jewish mythology, it was a pomegranate. So I don't know where we came up with the idea that it was an apple. That's a novel, new idea because it used to be a pomegranate and still is to most of the Jewish people. What was the fruit of that tree? We don't have a clue. There's nothing ever said. My dad's favorite line, comment on it was, you know, whatever it was, I wish that Adam had been smart enough to take more than one bite. You get what he's saying? We know just enough about good and evil to get ourselves into trouble. Oh, that we knew enough to actually, you remember what Satan's promise was? You eat this, you'll be like God. And apparently they didn't believe him. They just tasted it and got just enough like God to get them into trouble. Maybe they should have eaten the rest. I don't know what fruit that tree was, but if it was still around, I'm sure we'd be going for it, wouldn't we? For good or for bad. We just didn't learn anything the first time. I know none of y'all were like that growing up as children, that you didn't learn well the first time. Quality and distance mean nothing to God. Comments, thoughts?
I think it's interesting that this miracle that he just did, it says that it was his second miracle that he performed. So in that amount of time, they had traveled all the way to, there that he could do miracles.
How long do you suppose after the first one it took for the word to get out? I mean, there was a crowd at that wedding. How many people went and told everybody they knew about it?
What would have to have been a big event if he turned that gallons after they had already run out.
He's making gallons and tens of gallons, hundreds of gallons of wine after they've already drunk everything else. So this is toward the end of the time, the party there. So, pretty good sized crowd, I would imagine.
Back then, news travels faster than Facebook does today. You ask me how.
I'm sure that every one of them texted a message from the wedding, you know, on their phones.
I don't think they had phones back then.
So it was widely known by the time the wedding was over.
Wonder how many of them wanted to take some of it home with them when they left.
I wonder how many of them, you know, somebody else, you know, planning their wedding at the wedding and hey, where'd you get this stuff? I know that the servants all thought that. They were amazed at the quality of it, you know. Where'd you get this good stuff?
Well, also, we know Jesus made more than enough. When he fed the 5,000, they took baskets of leftovers. So it's not outside the norm for him to make more than was needed.
Not only, and by the way, think about that feeding of 5,000. Do you suppose it was really bad, rotten bread and moldy fish that they were served? The quality was there too. It's just that the amount is really impressive. I mean, probably weren't 5,000 people plus women and children at the wedding. I mean, as big as a wedding can get, probably not that many.
I may be misremembering, but wasn't there a verse that said that after everyone had eaten their fill, it wasn't, now just take a bite, everybody was full.
Everybody ate until they were full, and then they had leftovers. I don't know about you, but leftovers are the best part. You do know that, don't you? Some of those leftovers are way better than, I mean, that stuff's way better the second day than it is the first day. But enough that not everyone just got a bite, and we'll come to that one in just a minute. Well, we got one more to look at, and we're just about out of time. Take a look at John 5. John 5 begins, after these things there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. There was in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porticos. In these lay a multitude of those who were sick, blind, lame, withered, waiting for the moving of the waters. An angel of the Lord goes down at certain seasons into the pool and stirred up the water. Whoever is first after the stirring up of the water stepped in was made well from whatever disease they were afflicted. There was a man there who was ill for how long?
38 years.
38 years. How long do you have to have the same problem before the doctors tell you that there's no hope for you? You're not ever going to get better?
Probably less than that.
A whole lot less than that, usually.
Sometimes immediately,
Yeah,
age 2.
yeah, they see it right away and no, there's not anything can do to fix this. This man has been sick for 38 years. And since it's time to quit, just keep in mind, how long has something been wrong with you that nobody can cure, nobody can do anything about, nobody can make any better before God is able to still step in? Time doesn't matter. By the way, Does time mean anything to God? We struggle with understanding the word eternity. Was God before He created this world? Will God and His people continue long after this world is gone? How long? There's a couple of different songs that try to address that. One course that we sing when we've been there 10,000 years, right, shining as the sun. We've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. 10,000 years, what does that mean to eternity? That's not even a good drop in the bucket. You know, it's hilarious to hear so-called pseudoscientists talking about billions of years, things happening over billions of years. I say it's hilarious. There's some good scientific reasons to know that that's nonsense. But billions of years means what? How long is a year?
365 days.
One trip around the sun.
One trip of what planet?
Earth.
It's not one trip of Mercury around the sun. It's not one trip of Venus. It's not one trip of Mars. It's not one trip of Pluto. It's one trip of one planet around one sun. People talk about, encountering people on another planet. Do you realize you tell them how many years old you are and they have no clue understanding what you are talking about? Do you realize discussing with an angel, with God, God, I'm 70 something years old. This is terrible. Can't you do something? Well, whoop-de-doo. A little kid comes in, a 3-year-old, and says, Mark, I'm 3 years old. This is terrible. I'm getting so ancient. You're already smiling. You're going to laugh in that poor kid's face. Why? Because that's the dumbest thing you've ever heard, that a 3-year-old would think that he is really old. A 100-year-old person? Oldest man that ever lived. Methuselah, how old was he when he died? You remember? 969 years old. And as far as we know, he and none of those who lived to that age with him were in an old folks' home. You remember what's said about Moses? At 120 years of age, when he finally is taken by God, this one bothers me. It said his eyesight was not dim. He didn't have to wear glasses. His strength, his abilities were all still there. Can't imagine what eternity means. And can't imagine either how long that is. Does that mean John Boy's a sheep or a goat? Sitting on this side. We've had that argument many times, the two sides. We'll continue next week. Thank you.